Uncle Dan.
Yes, hello.
You know, I once had a boss, and this is a real, who declared that leadership is knowing when to leave. And he always had a knack for leaving right before things got crazy.
Right.
Which I really admired, and I've tried to incorporate that into my own life. So,
if you'll excuse me, I actually have to go right now.
Yeah.
I've got a little
You're a smart man. So today we're going to talk a little bit about leaving or knowing when to leave. And to do so, we've invited a couple of friends. First of all...
Interlopers.
Aunties, if you will. Our first, a dear old friend, is Dr. Chrissy Stroop. Chrissy, how are you faring in sleepy Portland?
Fine, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
nothing going on there.
Yeah, it's pretty quiet. And
it really is pretty quiet in most of the city. It's but people, they only show kind of right downtown where all the hot action is.
Essentially, It's wherever you are at any given time.
The good blocks is what I like to call them.
And secondly, we want to welcome a new friend, Dr. Lauren O'Neill.
I am a master, actually, not a doctor.
Well, good news. We bestowed upon you the How to Heretic Honorary Doctorate of Letters.
Yeah.
Finally.
And numbers and shapes. So
it is
which letters does that include?
Any 7 you like.
That's right.
So go ahead and put that on your resume. I think
it's all the letters except P, H, and D.
And you are in New York, I believe, Master Dr. Lauren.
Yes.
Excellent. How's life there?
We're a bi-coastal podcast right now.
Tri-coastal, if you count the Great Salt Lake as one of the coasts.
Exactly.
Yeah. And how is New York faring for you?
I haven't left my apartment in 5 months.
So just a normal day in New York.
I'm paying
Perfect.
like a lot of rent to never leave my apartment.
Good for you.
Yeah.
You're getting your money's worth.
Yeah.
So we brought these two on. We're a little late to the game, but today we want to talk about a book that the two of you have co-edited, contributed to as well, and published. Tell us about Empty the Pews.
Well, it's an anthology of personal essays about leaving the church. We've got essays from former evangelicals, Catholics, Mormons, and I am a former mainline Protestant, Presbyterian to be specific.
Nice.
Sexy.
Yeah, probably the least sexy title of any denomination, Presbyterian.
Yeah, Mormons were pretty boring, but then you start digging into it, and it's like, oh, okay. There's some shit going on there.
Yeah.
Latter-day?
We've got some exciting
Tell me
stuff
more.
happening.
Yeah.
We started talking about this project in, I believe, 2012 or so. We tossed around the idea
1,000 years ago.
Right.
in COVID time.
Before time. Yeah.
The before time, yes. The BC, if you will. But we didn't start working on it really until 2016. And I think the election of Trump kind of made it all the more urgent. And so we kind of framed the whole collection in terms of young people leaving conservative Christianity because of its bigotry, right-wing politics, culture wars, and so forth, and how we want to document that and preserve certain voices from this thing that's been happening really since the 1990s. There's been a huge surge in people leaving religion and becoming unaffiliated. They are sometimes referred to as the nones, Nones, which includes people with a lot of different spiritual or even religious beliefs, but are no longer affiliated with any church, as well as atheists and agnostics.
Right. Yes, the nuns have been exploding, and I'm glad that you guys are compiling these stories for archaeologists to discover someday, to know that we were here after
To know that we exist.
The great age of stupid is over. So I want to read a few excerpts from the book, if that's okay with you guys, and then we can just kind of talk about them, because there were some that I found just resonated with me so much. The first one I want to read is from A Girl's Guide to Sexual Purity by Carmen Maria Machado.
Yes.
And she describes, among other things, an awkward relationship with a much older pastor and her eventual escape from her faith. And so at one point she says, I had made a forest of my own beliefs and lived in it. Here's how I left. I stripped away the trees. My first God was a mishmashed Frankenstein of my imagination, made up of scraps from the Methodist kids and the evangelical kids, of my upbringing and my worst fears. Later, when Sam abandoned me, that's the older pastor, I tried to believe in a God who loved and still left his creations. I could not. For a while, God was a faint, hazy presence, and then even that evaporated. In time, the trees scrolled back. I'd made that forest up. Perhaps I'd needed to go through it to be the person I became, but to realize that it wasn't real, that took living. Now I was still alone, but at least I could see in all directions. And then she concludes this way. She's talking about her girlfriend that she hooked up. She's a lesbian, Dan.
She's actually bi. Just FYI.
Oh, well, fuck. There goes my whole premise. So she's talking about being with her girlfriend. We watched marriage equality blossom in one state and then another, and then another. We read memoirs about the struggles of gay and lesbian activists in the 90s, our lifetimes, our childhoods, and realized how lucky we are to have been born precisely when we were, to have crawled out from beneath our pasts and found each other. True love doesn't wait for anything, as it turns out. And she concludes with a really nice bit. I found my purity ring not too long ago, tarnished and buried in a container of bric-a-brac. I'd kept it accidentally, carried it through 5 different moves to 3 different states. It was never more than a few feet away from my joys and heartbreaks. I took a picture of the etching on the band, a photographer's instinct to preserve even my most foolish choices, and went to throw the ring out. I paused over the trash can after a few seconds' thought. I turned around and tossed it into my jewelry box, a reminder never to make promises I don't intend to keep.
Nice.
Very nice, huh?
Very powerful stuff.
Yeah.
The purity ring concept is, I mean, if there was ever a personal archaeology token as powerful as that, I can't think of what it would be.
Yeah. Luckily, I never had one of those. It's not, Mormons don't do it.
Yeah, Mormons have their own ring, but it's a totally different thing.
I've got a purity pledge. I think I still have it around somewhere. I've been wanting to find it because I'm super weird that way. Like,
oh no, I would want that totally.
Have you honored it, Chrissy?
Oh no.
Well, shit. That's a problem. That is a really nice story. This is one of my favorites that Liz Lenz contributed.
Yes.
Called Cottonwood
Okay, so
Creek.
wait,
Tell me.
Just to pop in for 1 second.
Pop.
If you liked that excerpt of Carmen Maria Machado's essay, you should buy her latest book, which is called In the Dream House. And it has a lot of the same material that's in this essay. She recycled a lot of it into that book. And then if you like Liz Lenz's excerpt that you're about to hear, she has a book out today as of this recording called Belabored, and you should also buy that.
Hey,
Neat.
Chrissy, can you come get your girl? Because I'm on here trying to hawk your book, and she's selling everybody else's. So,
I don't know
if you know how the publishing industry works, Lauren.
She knows better than I do.
Okay, so
Also,
buy those.
I mean,
buy those first.
not for nothing, but it's not like we all have time to read in this moment in history.
So this is Liz's beautiful story, Cottonwood Creek. It's kind of a tale of her family's pursuit of some kind of Christian utopia and how she found herself inevitably falling into the same habit. And this is her talking about a church she founded with her husband collapsing like all the previous dreams before it. Is that what Eve did with the apple? That first bite, the wrecking ball to an already ruined building? That first bite, the ruination of the truth? I wonder why I did it. I had seen one utopia fail. Why did I try to create another? But then, that is the model of the Christian God, creating a heaven, then an Eden, and when Eden failed, he opened up the rest of the world. This time it will be good, he said to himself, before erasing humanity with a flood and starting over. And he will try again, or so Christians believe. The promise of Revelation is that God will set up a new heaven and a new earth. I can't wait to see how those fail too. That is Christianity waiting for both the end and for paradise. Aren't we foolish to think that the two will ever be separated? We never leave the cycle. We cannot separate the failures of the Creator from creation. We can never stop hoping that this time will be good. And there's a beautiful conclusion here. But that doesn't stop us from trying. 5 years after the church closed, I ended my 12-year marriage and moved out of the house I shared with my husband. I rented a small cottage where the yard is unkempt and wild like my daughter's hair. And despite knowing better, when I moved in, I thought, this time it will be good. And when that was over, And when that too is over, and as it will be, I will try to create another and another. Every good thing is dangerous speculation. Each place is a small fortress of hope. I thought that was really beautiful.
I agree.
Wow.
It's very beautiful. Liz Lenz is really masterful in her prose. I also find it kind of depressing. I mean, I don't disagree. Utopia will never work, and nothing human lasts forever. I maybe disagree that we can't keep ourselves from trying, but I don't know. It's an interesting thought.
I think it also, to me, it also speaks to our programming, to the programming of people who come out of, high demand religions, that there's almost a gravity that's very hard to escape. The way, like when you read that whole story about this was just a program in her life. This is what her family did time after time after time. It's what she's done in her religious life. And now she's kind of, to me, it's almost like at some point, the lever has to make peace with their past, or at least learn to dance with those demons rather than run from them.
Oh, absolutely.
Exactly.
There's a lot of darkness in me.
Yeah. And I think to me, that was kind of what her story was saying. She's like, all right, if these are the habits I have, I'm going to own them, and I'm going to make them work for me.
That's so interesting. I hadn't thought about her essay from that angle, but that makes a lot of sense.
Oh, I'm learning to dance with my demons, but I'm not there yet. So
I mean, totally. That's like what making this book was for me. So,
well, let's talk about that. The next story I want to highlight is by one Lauren O'Neill.
What? I've heard of her.
Called A Glutton and a Drunkard.
Seriously,
and
it's one of the best essays in this book.
And before I read a couple of excerpts, just why don't you tell us just a little bit about the story and about yourself?
Oh, I wasn't prepared.
It's a subject you don't know anything about.
Right, yeah, I know too much about it. The essay is it starts with the line, with my dad it was God, 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 and with my mom it was fat, fat, fat. And it's kind of about how Christianity and diet culture are actually somehow two sides of the same coin. And they're all about sort of being disgusted with yourself and trying to rein yourself in. And as a side effect of that, being disgusted with everyone else and trying to rein everyone else in as well. And it never works.
True that. I totally buy that. And I think I've said this. I said this to Chrissy and Dan before. I think Lauren has the winning quote of the book, as far as I'm concerned, which is beautiful. Where you say, "The Bible says to love your neighbor as you love yourself. But what if Christianity has taught you not to love yourself? Then you hate your neighbor as you hate yourself, impotently in despair."
I do think that's one of the absolute best lines in the book. It's probably my favorite line in the entire book, too.
Yeah.
You all are so nice.
We're not really. We'll get there.
Gonna say we're being so nice about that horrific quote. Yeah, I mean it's a beautiful line, but the concept is both true and deeply, deeply saddening.
Well, there's so many moments like
line, but it's
there's
not
so
a
many
happy
moments
one.
like that in the book where these nebulous ideas that we all have coming out of religion, and we were too close to it. We didn't understand it entirely. We didn't understand the emotional context of everything. And that's one of the moments in the book where I'm just like, oh my God, in such simple language, there is an entire notion, right? There is an entire arc of Christianity or religion summed up so succinctly. So there's a lot of those, but that was my favorite. And then just a little further, you say, "I wouldn't say I've ever had an eating disorder, but surely there's something disordered about feeling a constant current of guilt for consuming more than a few hundred calories per day. I wouldn't say being raised Christian was necessarily abusive either, but surely there's something wrong with being taught to feel a constant current of guilt for being an inherently sinful human. Surely the mere fact of existing shouldn't fill me with dread and despair, even as an adult who left both the church and dieting culture behind many years ago. It may not have been abuse, but it was sort of spiritual starvation, an eating disorder of the soul." Yeah.
Yeah, that connection makes so much sense to me, and I was not, no one ever told me to diet at all because I'm a boy or whatever, but the connection just clicks for me.
Yeah, I mean,
Very
I think it's especially strong for women, but I don't think men are exempt from it.
There
From
are
that
different...
like idea of diet culture in some ways, but also just like the idea that your body is sinful. It probably manifests a little differently in the way it's taught to Christian boys, but like the idea that the body is bad.
Yeah,
totally.
You know.
Well, to me, it also definitely speaks to how the genders experience their Christianity differently, their time in Christianity differently. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really being taught since I was socialized and raised as a boy to diet, but I actually did go on the slim fast diet in middle school because I thought I was too fat.
Interesting.
I mean, because my household was so focused on this, my little brother definitely has told me how he felt like he needed to go on a diet, and it wasn't like directed at him. I don't think anyone ever told him that he should go on a diet, but because he was immersed in like me and my sister and my mom, that's what he picked up on.
He was picking up what they were putting down.
There are plenty of ways that Christianity can make you hate yourself, internalize in a certain way. I mean, conservative Christianity, there's a long line from antiquity to the present, has all kinds of hang-ups about all kinds of human things that have to do with the body that definitely aren't, exclusively for women, even though,
right,
particularly when it comes to purity culture, it hits them harder.
Right, totally. I as a young closeted queer kid in Mormonism, I definitely saw those as a bit of an outsider, whereas my peers were kind of seeing, the demands for certain masculine versus feminine behaviors as just to them normal.
Right.
So yeah, I totally get it. So there's this great. I want to give our Mormon friends a shout out here. So this is a story called "Burden of Proof" by Mel Wells. Who is a former Mormon and a survivor of some terrible abuse, who describes surviving not only physical and emotional torment, but the struggle of a gay woman trying to be something she was not. Tons of us won't understand that. She says, a beautiful excerpt here, "My faith died in the spring of 2007. I was driving from BYU housing to my BYU job and spotted a billboard for postmormon.org. Once I had the courage to go to the website, I pulled an all-nighter." This is such a common story. "I pulled an all-nighter researching the true, not church-sanctioned history of my religion. My Mormon worldview shattered overnight as I discovered that it was based on easily disproved doctrines. By morning, I was awash in shock and anger, and I hesitate to admit this, relief. God's judgment no longer loomed over me, and his love was no longer out of reach. None of it existed. God, my heavenly Father, was dead. They were putting my stepdad in the ground as I wrote the first draft of this essay, and I found myself thinking, that's all? It's over? I confess it's perplexing that the larger-than-life monstrous power he had over my childhood is, in hindsight, so small. Maybe that is where the shame stems from. I feel embarrassed to have been so influenced. You were a child, my wife reminds me. It's not your fault. There's a scene in the movie Good Will Hunting where Robin Williams' character tells Matt Damon's character that the abuse he'd been subjected to was not his fault. Williams repeats that a few times as we watch Damon go through cold indifference, hot anger, and finally tears. I choke up every time. Abused people nearly always feel responsible for their abuser's actions. It helps us push away the free-falling terror of never knowing what might spark an attack. We seek causation because it feels like control." And as an abuse survivor, Mormon/abuse survivor myself, that really resonated with me quite a bit, because I think part of what these structures do is enable abuse of so many different kinds, right? Mm-hmm. And physical just being one of them.
Well, it's not just an enabling. Let's be clear. I've read a lot of the Bible, not the whole thing. It's instructive about abuse. Like, it tells you how and when and why to abuse. This isn't just a side effect or it's not like this is just a tent. The religion is just a tent under which abusers may hide.
Yeah.
It is rather it's sanctioned by most religion.
I mean, certainly conservative Christians take those passages to heart, spare the rod and spoil the child, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the Bible actually describes God as a spouse who, there's a verse about like, Egypt will cringe away like a spouse like a wife getting beaten by her husband.
That's
like,
wow. It's
God
the poetry I love.
Yeah.
God will beat Egypt like a husband beats his wife.
There's also conflation of love and discipline.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these structures almost, like Dan, 99% of the time end up being completely patriarchal, right? So it is man being handed the keys to the family, right? It's the man
Which,
dominant.
as a straight cis white man, it feels like I made a mistake leaving at this point.
You're the only one it could have worked out for, Dan.
Yeah.
of all four of us. So, and I want to touch on this story, which is from an obscure personage called Now Defunct: Confessions of a Former Short-Term Youth Missionary to Russia by our dear friend Chrissy Stroop. So, Chrissy, I want to read the opening if I can.
Feel free.
I just love. There's a certain odor of Russia, a mix of tar and particular kinds of exhausts and who knows what else. It isn't offensive, really. It's just present. And it's still there, despite all the changes that have taken place over the years. Every time I get a whiff of something akin to that distinctive post-Soviet aroma here in the United States, I'm briefly whisked back to Russia in my mind, sometimes to the very first time I visited the country that would become a much bigger part of my life than I ever imagined possible. So I love that because I kind of share that with you. I was there a few years before you. I was a very young man. And that when you described that smell, I could taste it.
It's really something. Smells are so hard to describe, but if you've smelled it, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and it's distinctive. I've never felt that anywhere else.
It's got to be particular particulates, but well, I mean, yeah.
When you say Russia has an influence, are you talking about like in our political process, or is that in your life? It's choosing your presidents. Is that what you're referencing?
No.
Oh, okay.
I've spent a lot of time in Russia, because after being inspired to learn Russian, and having these pen pals, and even having then a relationship with one of the people that I met at these Russian summer camps. Well, they weren't Russian summer camps. They were Russian summer camp sites where our American evangelical organization led mission trips, right? So they were sort of, Russian American summer camps for Jesus. But yeah, I mean, I had friends, I had pen pals. And so I ended up deciding to study Russian history when I decided to study history and go on to do that for a PhD. So I taught English in Russia for a year after I finished college. And by that time, I had deconstructed my faith enough that I did not want to be involved with any kind of missionary projects. And so I just went to a regular secular school, except then I learned that, those kinds of things may have some sort of cultural missionary elements to them as well, though I certainly don't want to bash this particular project. I mean, I think it's been a good site of cultural exchange in the town of Vladimir. It's a place called the American Home. Mm-hmm. It still exists, but in the recent climate of declining Russian-American relations, the land it was on and the building was expropriated by the city government, and they turned it into a museum of Russian cherry production.
Oh, I can't wait to visit. That's really
cherries, yes,
top of mind for me. How did the Russians produce cherries? That's literally top of mind. So
they already made a whole play about that. We don't need.
That's right. That's right. Well, and that's how you end your essay, Chrissy. Is you're just saying, look, I wasn't in many ways. I'm not the person I was when that experience began, but you don't regret that that's the direction your life took. Right, that you became this Russia scholar and you're fluent in Russian and you have this connection to this other country in so many great ways. And I like how you kind of bring the story home with that.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I don't regret having learned all those things. And some of the experiences were harrowing to live through, like, being in Russia from 2012 to 2015 and living there through the annexation of Crimea and, the subsequent capital flight, devaluation of the ruble. My salary was paid in rubles. I was trying to pay down debt in dollars. it was pretty stressful. It was pretty stressful, but I had a front row seat, do some interesting historical events. I'm kind of glad to be on this side of them. And, and I'm sad about the direction that Russia has gone, just as I'm sad about the direction that America has gone and continues to go. But one insight that I came away with is that Russia and America are very similar places. We're both totally fucked up.
Yes, in our own special way. So I want to jump into, well, actually, I wanted to read some excerpts from Linda Tirato's story, but I honestly think reading excerpts is doing it a disservice. I think people need to read it in full because it is too crazy to be true.
Linda's story is wild.
It is wild, and it's amazing, and she's, as we know from recent news events, a hard ass, so please get the book and read her story.
Yes, You may have seen her on Twitter. It was widely circulated. She lost an eye to a rubber bullet in the recent protests.
Yeah, covering them as a journalist. So
yeah, she went up to Minneapolis, and
again, Russia and America, we're not so different, are we, Chrissy?
Right?
Well, no. We are in so many ways like reflections of each other. We both have these like post-imperial hangovers, and we have this really stupid need to feel great, and we have like, I don't mean like feel great like, oh, it feels so great being in the bathtub right now, but like, greatness. Superior. Right? The whole bullshit concept of greatness. We have to be the greatest country in the world. So of course we make great frenemies.
We're perfect perfect mirror images of each other.
And the funny thing is, when I first started going to Russia and even getting interested in foreign travel, I was looking for things that were different so I could hold them up as a mirror to America and criticize America. And then, a couple decades later, I'm like, yeah, so both the countries I chose to spend a lot of my life in suck in very similar ways. They're both full of conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, you decided not to go to Denmark or Norway, so that's on you. So
one of the parallels that I think is really interesting about the U.S. and Russia is, especially in this moment in history, is the deep connection between religion and the state. And
yes.
Even though America has pretense toward that not being the case, right now, I mean, there are innumerable pastors with a hall pass to the White House, and that one compares that to the Russian Orthodox Church, which is basically a state sanctioned religion.
Oh, absolutely! Just look at all the taxpayer money that illegitimately went to mega churches and
we just did a story on
things like that through that whole
war church.
So-called small business loan program.
Yeah, it's crazy. So let's leave Russia for a minute and let's finish before we just go crazy with a couple of pieces of this essay by the artist, writer, and musician Isaac Marion called A Better Dream. And this one really spoke to me, maybe as a fellow kind of creative and artist. I responded to his language, but I really think this is a great essay to end the book with. And I'll read a couple short pieces so you guys can see why I think that. By the time I was a teenager, I was deeply dissatisfied with the worldview the church was feeding me. And it wasn't just the sketchy theology or regressive social mores. It was the shadow of nihilism behind it all. Because for all the talk about hope and joy, Christianity is a doomsday faith. We kept our eyes on the sky, craving Christ's return and the earthly annihilation it would bring. Life was merely an obstacle on our path to heaven. God put it there, so it must have had a purpose. But we were a bit hazy on what the purpose might be, because the final tally of the universe had no space for human contributions. Earth was a temporary stage for a brief and confusing drama, and when it reached its scripted conclusion, God would step in to sweep the stage clean along with anything we'd managed to build on it. I found this idea incredibly bleak. I could see no reason for us to be here, no reason to look forward to the future, to take care of the planet, or contribute to society or work toward a better world, because there would be no better world. It was all right there in Revelation. The world would get worse and worse until God finally pulled the plug on this strange experiment, nuked it from orbit in an apocalyptic fire, and whisked us away to heaven. Nothing we could do would affect the conclusion or efforts. We would leave no trace. We would leave no trace. And then
sounds
he finishes,
good to me.
Yeah, great. Right? And then he finishes,
I struggled with very similar thoughts.
Yeah, I think we all did. Like, if
and
it's all going to be destroyed, what's the purpose?
that heaven was going to be boring. And when I thought that as a kid, I was so afraid that I would go to hell for thinking it. But like, I couldn't imagine eternity, let alone eternity of singing praises to God forever. It really sounded quite dull and unattractive.
So that's part of our whole podcast, is for a certain patronage level, we will write a heaven for you, and they're all based on that principle, that it's like amazing, but after like the first 12 million years, it's the same shit, right? Never change.
I don't know how many of you might have been watching Lucifer. I'm eagerly waiting for season 5. But, one of my favorite lines from that show is when Lucifer, in spite of himself, kind of gets to know and gets to like a Catholic priest who then dies. And then he's upset that he's dying. And he says, "It's really boring where you're going."
He should take him to hell.
I was going to ask if you had seen The Good Place, where after a few Jeremy Baramies, you get bored.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it
yet.
That
reference didn't land. That's okay.
Highly recommended. I haven't seen it yet. So I'll finish his essay. I'll finish with this little excerpt. Surely I'm angry at God for the death of a loved one, or for the suffering of children, or some other dramatic betrayal. Well, not really. Christianity wasn't a soap opera to me. It was real, and I took it seriously. Events in my personal life don't change the structure of the universe. I don't turn my back on the law of gravity because a friend dies in a plane crash. If it's true, right? But religion isn't gravity. Religion isn't true or untrue, and that's not the point. Religion will never be provable. So all we can ask for is for it to be meaningful, for it to resonate with our lived experience. Gravity is meaningful. Gravity explains things that I observe in the world around me. It illuminates cause and effect and fits into my experiences in ways that intuitively work. Christian theology, at least the version of it that permeates our culture, doesn't work. It doesn't grow organically from the human experience. It's a strange alien universe superimposed over our own, an awkward assemblage of arbitrary rules and paradoxical concepts shoved roughly over the world we know. I think that's pretty sweet. That's pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
I can't disagree.
Yeah. I think it's a really concise idea of like, it just needs to work, right? And at some point in your life, you're like, I don't think this is working.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's this whole the whole concept of the God of the gaps, which is that, religion's there to explain all the things that we don't have answers for. And as those gaps get increasingly infinitesimal, as we start to understand the universe more and more, the question then becomes like, what are we doing with this God guy? Is he useful anymore?
Yeah, he's just in the gaps. He's not in the wide open spaces at this point.
Right.
So.
And he's certainly not. He explains less and less, and the explanations are less and less satisfying as we sort of understand our universe.
To me, I think a useful God concept wouldn't be one that so much explains everything as helps us to navigate life in ways that, to use Isaac Marion's word, are meaningful. But the kind of God that I learned about and the kind of Christianity that I internalized and was just, swimming in growing up, doesn't do that. He makes everything worse. He's a giant abuser. He's a right. giant, negging pickup artist in the sky.
Right.
Yeah. I also think about you still get high profile Christians being like, oh, well, we had this earthquake because of gay marriage, and it's like, okay, 3,000 years ago, when you didn't understand what an earthquake was, or a flood, or, lightning.
Yeah.
The best explanation was it must be God.
We have better explanations.
But now that we have better explanations, do we still need to keep turning to God for earthquakes?
Well, if he confirms all your biases, yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's
exactly. That kind of thinking is part of what I call a politics of providentialism.
It's an excellent term for it. So, to conclude, you guys have a little news, I think.
We do.
Yes. Are we breaking it on the How to Heretic?
This is exclusive. You got exclusive from it.
Okay, it's an exclusive.
Woo! I'm excited.
Tell us. What is our exclusive news?
Well, we've been talking to Epiphany Publishers, which published Empty the Pews, for some time now, about doing a follow-up volume. And we're ready to announce that we're going to be doing that. We don't have a working title for it yet, but we do have a concept of how we want to develop the direction from the first book and expand on it, or just kind of, make things a little bit different, but same broad idea. Lauren, do you want to get more specific?
No, you do it.
Okay. So,
Could you guys not fight on our fucking show? Could you work this shit out before you come on?
You know what? Fine. I'll do it.
Dan, do it.
So I just don't want to monopolize my time. But okay, so Empty the Pews has essays only by former conservative Christians from Catholic, Mormon, and evangelical traditions, and Lauren is the one mainliner. But it also has a kind of geographic scope where we focus on North American Christianity, though we sometimes look at its international footprint, impact, also diasporas and immigration, and those sorts of things. So we're going to keep that geographic focus the same for this next volume, but we want to start broadening what kinds of former believers we talk to in order to facilitate wider ex-fundamentalist conversations. So
nice.
This second volume is going to include, for example, ex-Amish, probably ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. Maybe I think we'll want to have more ex-Mormons. We didn't have many in the last one, but also maybe fundamentalist Mormons, ex-Muslims, ex-ultra-Orthodox Jews, and so forth. And maybe instead of situating this so much in a framing of, electoral politics, this one will look more at social issues and psychological problems on the ground. Help us perhaps get a handle on some things that are similar and different for people who come out of fundamentalism of different sorts, And I know that one major issue that many ex-fundamentalists have, whether they're ex-ultra-Orthodox Jewish, ex-Amish, sometimes ex-evangelical or ex-fundamentalist, when you've gone to Christian schools or you've been homeschooled, is that, you get a really terrible education. You get this ideological indoctrination instead. And sometimes you don't even get basic life skills like math, etc.
Right.
There is no federal right to a robust education for children.
Especially not right now.
In the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not even a legally recognized right. And in fact, there is Supreme Court precedent. 1972, I believe, Wisconsin v. Yoder is the SCOTUS decision that allowed the Amish communities to only educate their children up through 8th grade, and only in their own kind of very specific schools, which of course makes it difficult for young people to actually make a conscious choice of how they want to navigate their Amish heritage and whether they want to leave the church or not, right?
Right.
I mean, everyone makes a big deal out of the whole Rumspringa thing, which supposedly gives them the choice to rebel and leave.
It's a trap. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
We've
all been given supposed choices, right?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
It's set up for them to fail and come back to the safety of the church and the Amish community, right? So, I've been involved with this organization called the Amish Heritage Foundation that was founded by Tora Bontrager, who escaped an abusive situation and, ran away from home after 8th grade to live with an uncle who had also left an Amish community so that she could continue to educate herself. And so the children's rights and children's right in particular to an education is something that she cares deeply about. So that's kind of what's been shaping my thinking as I want to move toward this new project with Lauren.
And looking at more at the margins, there's a lot of evangelicals, a lot of Catholics, a lot of Mormons, but then if you start looking at Jehovah's Witnesses and Amish and there's just simply not that many Muslims in America. There's not that many ultra-Orthodox Jews in America. We're looking more at the margins in the sequel.
Well, I look forward to reading the second one as well. I mean, I don't look forward to it, but it's kind of my job. But listen, I cannot recommend this book enough. I really hope everybody will have the opportunity to read it. It's beautiful, and it spoke to me, obviously, 100 different ways. You guys, where can people find you if they want to go looking for you?
Well, first, let me say really fast, for those who might be interested in submitting a proposal for an essay contribution to the second volume, which doesn't have a title yet, send us an email at emptythepews2, that's spelled out empty the pews and then just the number 2, at gmail.com. And we'll have a call for proposals up soon, letting people know the criteria, like how many words do we expect and so forth. But yeah, and as for where you can find me, I'm on Twitter at C_Stroop, STROOP. I also have a website at cstroop.com. I write regularly right now for Religion Dispatches and The Conversationalist. I've contributed less regularly to Dame Magazine, Playboy Magazine, Foreign Policy Magazine. So yeah,
she's everywhere. She's literally everywhere.
Dame and Playboy.
Yeah,
just sister publications
and Religion Dispatches. It's all the same, really.
I am on Twitter at Lauren E. O'Neill. O'Neill spelled with an A, like Shaquille spells it. And my podcast is Sunday School Dropouts. It's on hiatus at the moment, but if you want to listen to me, an ex-Christian, and my husband, a non-believing sort of Jew, read all the way through the Bible, you can listen to that.
Amazing.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much for joining us, and thank you for your work, and we will talk to you guys again soon.
Well, we'll talk to you when the next book comes out.
Yeah, if not before.
Yeah, I hope it'll be before that, because I don't know, this could take a while.
All right, take care.
You too.